A man on the roadside burped loudly and ended up spitting out a golden ring, but that's not all. He suddenly lowered his head, as if money didn't matter, and a pile of gold rings poured out from him. Then he went to a pawn shop and dumped all the rings onto the counter. The shopkeeper's eyes went wide in surprise. Seeing the shopkeeper's expression, it was clear she was starting to get some crooked ideas. She quickly grabbed the purity testing instrument, while the man looked around the shop at various old items with great curiosity. Soon, he started dismantling and reassembling things. Not long after, a strange-looking contraption was created. At that moment, the shopkeeper finished her calculations and handed the man the cash. The man went to the mainland, using the device he had just made to search for the way forward. He didn't notice that the money seemed to be misplaced, drifting out of his pocket as he walked. Before long, it seemed he received a signal from his home planet. Looking up, he saw buildings from his home world. Yes, he was an alien, but in the next moment, he was knocked unconscious by a thug. It turned out that the evil money had caught the thug's attention. As an alien, he had no idea what robbery was, nor why the thug had beaten him. At that moment, Justin happened to pass by and saw what was happening. She warned herself not to get involved, but ultimately her kind heart couldn't stand by. She turned her car around and used a gun to scare off the thief. The alien rushed toward her, almost pleading for Justin to take him to a specific coordinate. Justin checked the map and saw that the coordinate was 200 miles away. Sure enough, this crazy man didn't seem like he'd do anything normal. Besides, Justin had a family to take care of, and she didn't have time to entertain his madness. Unexpectedly, the alien suddenly offered all his money to Justin. Reluctantly, she agreed to help him, but the alien was very displeased with the idea of humans needing food. He considered it a waste of time on his journey. He quickly drew a map, and Justin was amazed because the numbers were in a base 60 system. Even more impressive, the writing was in a 3,000-year-old script. Justin instantly became intrigued. For the first time, she asked the man's name. He told her he was Faraday. She asked Faraday how he had found her. He explained that it was his mentor's suggestion. When Justin looked up his mentor, she was even more shocked. His mentor was a legendary figure from the last century who had founded a tech company with 10 patents, making it one of the world's top enterprises. When she heard Faraday say that his mentor, like him, was also an alien, she let out a laugh. She just couldn't believe what Faraday said, despite the many mysteries surrounding him. A few hours later, they arrived at the destination. Faraday strongly insisted that Justin join him to listen to Thomas's instructions. Justin refused on the spot, but an insistent Faraday couldn't understand her. He almost tore the door off her car. Eventually, Justin grabbed her gun, and they parted ways. But not long after, Justin noticed the weather had changed drastically. Soft-hearted as she was, she turned the car around to save Faraday. To her shock, she witnessed something incredible. To others, it looked like a tornado, but to this man, it was a holographic video call. The man walked into the eye of the storm, and in the next moment, he was transported to another space. His mentor, Thomas, appeared before him. His first words were, "Don't trust humans," followed by a recount of the torment he'd endured for decades. His company was swallowed up, his skin peeled off, and his eyes were gouged out. It turned out that they were all aliens from a planet called Anxia. Due to water energy depletion, Thomas came to Earth with the mission to save his home planet. He had 10 patents and was thriving on Earth. Unfortunately, he ran into the CIA, which not only took control of his company but also forced him to hand over his 11th patent. This patent was the key to completing his mission. Worse, the CIA had discovered his true identity. As a result, the CIA tortured him and used him as a subject for alien research. 45 years ago, he used the same method to send a message to Faraday, telling him to come to Earth. His next step was to have Faraday go to the company he founded to obtain the 11th patent, then gather people to continue the experiments and construction. The name of the company was a bit strange. Thomas told Faraday to find a woman named Justin, as only she could help him translate the technology into Earth's scientific terms. Little did he know, Justin was outside, and after the tornado disappeared, Faraday, dehydrated, revealed his lizard-like appearance, scaring Justin into running away. Faraday was left to walk back alone. He arrived at a restaurant, where, desperate for water, he grabbed a customer's cup and drank from it. If not for the kind waitress, he would have been beaten again. Faraday kept talking to the waitress in a language she couldn't understand. The waitress said she couldn't help him. He handed her some money, the most useful skill he had learned on Earth. After a long conversation, the waitress finally understood he was talking about a company far away in Seattle. She told Faraday that it was far, and he would need to take a plane. At that moment, Faraday said. "Your body's pulse is 110 beats per minute. You're pregnant." Faraday quickly hopped into a taxi to the airport. The driver was curious why he wasn't carrying any luggage. After a confused exchange, Faraday realized he needed identification to buy a ticket. He looked at the driver's ID hanging in the car and grabbed it, thinking that would work. At the airport, Faraday seemed very uncomfortable around the various electronic devices. When he handed over the ID, the ticket agent felt insulted by his intelligence. At that moment, it seemed like the electronic devices reacted to him. In an instant, all the equipment malfunctioned. Faraday stumbled away from the scene, but he didn't get far before collapsing on the ground, vomiting a pool of water. What seemed like a regular tornado had triggered a major stir in the intelligence community. They had detected an encrypted signal inside the tornado. What was even stranger was that 45 years ago, the same location had experienced another tornado with the same signal. Despite all their efforts, they couldn't decode the signal. The female leader brought in the top agent, Spencer, to investigate. She told Spencer that this could be a terrorist attack on the US and that everyone involved in the truth had died, except for one person who might as well be dead. Such a difficult task only excited Spencer more. He quickly traveled deep into the mountains and through the woods to find the person's house. But as soon as he turned around, he was knocked unconscious. When he woke up, he was tied to a chair, and an old man with wild hair was standing in front of him. The old man immediately checked Spencer's eyes. After inspecting him, he calmly began washing his hands. Spencer quickly spoke his intentions, but when the old man heard about the signal in the tornado, he froze. Then, gripping a knife, he twisted it, making blood pour out. But he didn't feel any pain. He started mumbling to himself. He said, "We thought it was a one-way transmission, but now it seems like there's a response. I thought we could survive." Suddenly, he ran up to Spencer and shouted, "Who sent you?" Then he spoke about Thomas being an angel. Next, he kneeled on the ground, confessing, until he had the knife at Spencer's throat. Spencer knew he couldn't wait any longer. He kicked the old man away and broke the chair. Once freed, the old man grabbed a shotgun and aimed it at Spencer's neck. But instead of shooting Spencer, he shot himself. Based on the old man's words, Spencer had a realization. He searched everywhere and finally found a videotape in the fridge. The tape showed Thomas, strapped to a bed, refusing to give up some technology. The people had gouged out his eyes and brutally peeled off his skin. But underneath the man's skin, it seemed like there was another face. Spencer has already guessed that the incident might be related to aliens. After conducting his investigation, he reported the preliminary results to his female superior. This was a secret CIA project from 45 years ago. At that time, intelligence agents were almost certain that this Thomas was an alien. But during the interrogation, Thomas suddenly disappeared. Spencer suspects that another alien has now arrived on Earth. Although the writing left by Thomas is unreadable, the blueprints for technology number 11 repeatedly show the sun, which likely relates to light or energy. Spencer meticulously reported to his superior in order to secure more funds and authority. However, he deliberately concealed the existence of the videotape. It's unclear what he's up to. Before long, Spencer's team had set up and quickly uncovered the identity of the woman Thomas had been screaming for in pain. Spencer arrived at a convent just as a batch of Mares were having difficulty giving birth and needed help. Spencer was pulled in to assist. The woman was quite fond of this young man, finding him to be kind and honest. When she heard Spencer mention that he had come because of Thomas, she excitedly said she had been waiting for 45 years. Clearly, she misunderstood. Then she started acting strangely, applying honey to her face and letting bees sting her face until it was swollen with welts. She rambled on, but Spencer didn't understand a word. Obviously, she mistook Spencer for someone else. However, there was a significant breakthrough on the team's end. The building where the London company's headquarters was located suddenly lit up half the city. Due to an unknown power surge, Spencer's subordinates found that a few days earlier, a man named Faraday and a woman named Justin had boarded a private plane heading to this location. Flight attendants later revealed that something strange had happened on the plane. Faraday lightly touched the old man's neck, and in an instant, the old man's illness was cured. But then the man collapsed to the floor, struggling in pain, and black liquid began flowing from his pores, floating up into the air and drifting outside through the air vents. The old man's daughter, Justin, rushed in and saw her father, now radiant, standing up from his wheelchair. She was stunned, crying tears of joy. Just hours earlier, Justin had received a call from the police saying that her friend was vomiting water at the airport and asked her to come pick him up. Justin replied that he wasn't her friend at all. The first time the police contacted her was because the man was drinking water. the second time, it was because he was vomiting it. But when they met, Faraday started rambling again, saying he was an alien and had a mission to fulfill. The destination was Seattle. He begged Justin to take him there, but she took him to her home, wanting him to see how difficult her life was. Her father had over 10 illnesses and was bedridden, and Justin also had a 6-year-old daughter to take care of. Unexpectedly, Faraday quietly entered the elderly man's room while Justin wasn't paying attention and strangled him. The next second, all the lights in the house turned on, and Justin rushed back home, only to witness the scene. Now the old man was cured and could help look after the child, and Justin no longer had any worries. As a token of gratitude, Justin agreed to go to Seattle with Faraday, because the airport's strong electromagnetic waves would make Faraday vomit water. The two could only drive there. On the way, Faraday pulled out an object the size of a Rubik's Cube. As he spread his hand over it, the cube floated up, transforming into the shape of a lotus flower. It floated into a long-abandoned oil rig machine, and the 100-ton machine miraculously powered on and started turning. Justin was completely dumbfounded. As a former fusion technology expert, she immediately recognized the value of this object. She kept asking questions. Was there radiation? Why didn't it need cooling? How long could it run? How could it be mass-produced? Faraday told her that this was quantum fusion, with no radiation and no need for cooling. It was just a small model given to him by Thomas, but it provided him with the power to fly to Earth. They had to find the company's patent blueprints quickly to produce the same fusion device. They found the company's CEO, Hatch. However, Hatch had just been kicked out of the management team by his sister due to internal conflict. He was sulking, so he rudely told Faraday and Justin to leave. But when they presented a blueprint, Hatch was stunned. It looked exactly like the text on patent number 11. He had never seen anyone else who could write this, so he believed Faraday's story. Upon learning that Faraday could create a fusion device, Hatch was excited. He said the tech company's headquarters would hold a technical seminar tomorrow, and if they could convince the audience, they might be able to make demands. However, the headquarters was in London, and they couldn't drive there. Faraday also couldn't fly by plane due to the airport's electromagnetic waves. In the end, they thought of chartering a private plane. Hatch, eager to reclaim control of the company, paid for a plane. However, shortly after takeoff, Justin screamed and rushed to Faraday. It turned out that his head had swollen up like a balloon due to the pressure change. Almost ready to burst, Justin quickly helped him press down, while Hatch went to stop the flight attendant who was coming over in response to the noise. Fortunately, there were no further incidents on the way. When they reached the conference, Justin realized it was just the beginning of a nightmare. Hatch was a person with no real authority. When he tried to boast about bringing quantum innovation to his former colleagues, he was met with mockery. It turned out that he had always been an idealist who had done nothing in the company, and no one took him seriously. Meanwhile, Faraday, seeing an egg for the first time, thought it was some kind of treasure and insisted on taking some home for his wife and kids to try. It took some effort to talk him out of it, but then he started arguing with a talking parrot. The back and forth between the two drew everyone's attention. Finally, after enduring all of that, Justin thought the seminar would start, but Faraday walked up and started correcting the fundamental errors in a formula presented by a renowned expert. This expert had 50 years of research experience, and Faraday's behavior was incredibly rude. The senior professors immediately stood up to criticize him. Justin and Hatch were nervous, while Hatch's sister gave him a look of disgust and walked out. It seemed as if she was saying that his embarrassment was none of her concern, while Faraday, facing the professor's criticism, nonchalantly said, "I brought a model of quantum revolution." The room fell silent. Faraday turned to Justin, and with a nod of encouragement from her, he reached into his pocket. Soon, the room became brightly lit, and the change in lighting shocked everyone. They all turned to the windows and saw half of London illuminated. This miraculous scene was all due to the small device Faraday held in his hand. It floated and spun like a lotus flower in his palm. This device could provide free electricity to an entire city for a year, making power outages a thing of the past. The key point was that this was just a prototype. Once it was mass-produced, it could save Earth from the looming water scarcity crisis in 2030. Far away on the edge of the solar system, the planet Anxiao was facing a similar crisis. As temperatures rise, water resources are depleting. According to Earth's development speed, 2030 would be the deadline. At that moment, the Anshian people realized that Earth's fate was tied to theirs, and Earth's survival depended on their clean energy technology. They first sent a man named Thomas to Earth, but after a few years, he disappeared. Earth's greed, which took over his company and demanded his technology, led to his disappearance. Unaware of the impending water crisis in 8 years, Earthlings continued with their lives. In desperation, Thomas made a long-distance call and brought in another man, Faraday, to continue the mission. However, when Faraday arrived at the laboratory, the first thing he did was fix the shell of the light ball. Meanwhile, in another room in the basement, the CIA surveillance screen suddenly went static. It turned out that Faraday's actions had long been under CIA surveillance, though Faraday himself didn't know that the electromagnetic shielding from the light ball had protected their privacy. Next, Faraday looked troubled. The blueprints left by Thomas, though seemingly independent, were incomplete. They lacked connections and couldn't be used to produce the fusion device. Moreover, the raw materials and elements that Thomas had stockpiled had half-lives on Earth that were far too short to be useful. He told Hatch that either Thomas had gone insane or he himself was a fool. Faraday was deeply shaken, and just as he was at a loss, the supernatural phenomenon of an alien seeing ghosts on Earth gave him the answer he had been seeking. He met the old woman who had once worked with Thomas. She said that whenever Thomas faced a difficult problem, he would take a walk by the water to relax. Then she took Faraday out, and many of her words gave Faraday great inspiration. The old woman was always holding a bottle of alcohol, drinking as she walked. They arrived at a bar, and she wanted to buy Faraday a drink, but Faraday refused. She continued telling Faraday stories about Thomas, but when they returned to the laboratory, the old woman started causing chaos, pulling out wires and shutting off the light bulbs, and even throwing things around the lab. The worst part was when she picked up a hammer and tried to smash things. Faraday tried to stop her, but as he raised his hand to strike, he turned around and saw only his own reflection in the glass. There was no old woman. It turned out that all along, he had been alone. He had been drinking and causing a scene on the street, taking a homeless man's hat and putting it on. Then he continued drinking at the bar and went back to the lab to cause more trouble. Suddenly, he looked at the blueprints and remembered what the old woman had told him earlier. "What did you see at 30,000 feet? Faraday looked at the blueprints and then overlapped all the designs. Before him appeared a pattern resembling the spaceship of his home planet, the very same one he saw when he left his home world. Faraday smiled foolishly and quickly rushed to Justin's house to share the good news, completely unaware that the CIA agent next door had already seen everything that had happened here. When Faraday arrived at Justin's house, he was surprised to learn that Justin had good news as well. While sorting through some clutter, Justin's father had found old notes of Justin's, which revealed that she had once researched a deuterium-boron substance that could replace deuterium. Faraday instantly understood. No wonder Thomas had insisted on getting Justin's help. The experiment was activated immediately, but in the following days, repeated failures nearly drove them to the edge. They held meeting after meeting, discussing how to use a function to derive a harmonious waveform from chaotic atoms, but it was incredibly difficult due to the complexity of the problem. At this critical moment, Justin's father also began to show signs of trouble. His actions started to become mechanical, similar to Faraday's, and recently he had developed a passion for jazz music, playing the guitar non-stop, until he was exhausted and collapsed. Justin took him to the hospital, and the doctor diagnosed him with a stroke. Justin asked Faraday what was wrong with her father, and Faraday said he wasn't sure, but he was certain that her father had his genes, and that he was evolving and becoming more like him. Justin didn't care if Faraday was being a bit harsh. She had just received a call from the police saying her father had stood at a busy intersection all day. She rushed over and found that her father was studying bees, and when they got home, he had written countless numbers on the walls and paper. Faraday looked at these numbers and seemed to grasp some pattern. However, to protect his numbers, the old man even hit his daughter. Justin, seeing that her father was no longer the man he had been, vented her frustration on Faraday and kicked him out of the house. Faraday went to the riverbank, his mind full of the numbers and the old man's words. At that moment, he looked up and saw a flock of birds in the sky. The birds' arrangement seemed both random and ordered at the same time. In an instant, he had an epiphany. The answer was jazz music. Jazz is different from all other music. Other music is a performance, but jazz is a form of communication. He immediately rushed to Justin's house and began drawing circles on the wall. Justin, typing away on the keyboard, and soon, everything fell into place. They marveled at the beauty of the world and went to the laboratory. The mini-mold keyboard was placed in the center, with the computer on either side. As the music and typing intertwined, the fusion reactor started spinning, first emitting yellow light, followed by blue light, but quickly turning red. This was a danger signal, and Justin immediately shouted at the old man. Faraday quickly joined in the playing. After several intense and rapid adjustments, the resonance finally became harmonious, and the fusion reactor began to glow a brilliant purple. The The lights in the houses around the laboratory turned on. They had succeeded. However, just when they were expecting mass production, the senior management of the technology company wanted to halt progress. This unusual behavior quickly led Justin to realize that the CIA had malicious intentions and that Thomas had impure motives. What would happen if they created a quantum fusion reactor? One could power an entire country for a year. If they made a smaller version, it could power electric cars, and no one would need to refuel or recharge again. The term carbon emissions would disappear forever, but the evil CIA wouldn't allow this. They wanted to seize control of the fusion reactor. Their plan was simple: first use it for the military, then for civilians, and maintain tight control over the core competitiveness. Fortunately, the clever Justin noticed that a new board member was actually a CIA agent. The reason was simple: the people at the technology company should have been happy when the experiment succeeded, because it meant they could make money. But CEO Miss Edie said they should slow down. Justin was confused. She noticed that Edie kept glancing nervously at Spencer. Justin, suspicious, asked Spencer a few technical questions, but Spencer couldn't answer. Justin immediately realized that Spencer was probably from a secret department, most likely the CIA. She quickly went to Faraday. It took him a lot of effort to explain the situation to Faraday. She said that this machine contained energy as big as a small asteroid. Now, government agents had arrived, and they would never let him go. In fact, both of them might be silenced. Didn't Thomas plan all of this? Hadn't he considered their situation? Justin was now truly desperate, but Faraday dismissed her. He opened a screen wall made of 9 old televisions and turned on the fusion reactor. The CIA's surveillance footage immediately disappeared. Faraday twisted a nearby knob. This was a power given to him by the fusion reactor, the ability to communicate with Thomas. Faraday immediately scolded Thomas for not explaining the plan clearly from the start, leading him to go through so many hardships, and now he was in danger. Thomas replied that these experiences were necessary for Faraday to understand his mission. When dealing with humans, the most important lesson is deception and lies. Also, find a journalist and make yourself a legend. Humans are vain and love idols. You must make yourself a person everyone focuses on, so you can protect yourself and complete the mission. At that moment, Thomas reminded Faraday to end the call quickly, because the CIA agents were about to arrive. Sure enough, just after Faraday disconnected, the agent rushed in. Although she missed, she knew that Faraday had been communicating with Thomas. This terrified her, terrified enough to reveal her identity to Justin and seek help. It turned out that just a few days ago, the CIA tracked Thomas's whereabouts in a jungle in Cambodia. They had once shipped tens of thousands of tons of concrete, clearly to build a signal-blocking shelter. Since the jungle was an excellent place to avoid satellite detection, the eager Spencer had sent a commando team to capture him. But something unexpected happened. Not long after entering the cave, they were drawn to strange falling fruits. When the fruits exploded, green smoke spread, and the next moment, the soldiers' heads exploded. Their deaths were gruesome. The agents showed Justin the video, but Faraday had just contacted her. They didn't know what Thomas's true intentions were, but Faraday had just contacted him. If Thomas gets the fusion reactor, the consequences would be unimaginable. It could lead to the extinction of humanity on Earth. Justin was deeply shocked as she thought about her family and the safety of humanity. She had to find Faraday and discuss whether Thomas had already turned dark, or perhaps Thomas was hiding some secret from Faraday. This question actually hit Faraday's nerve, because among the ancients, they were divided into two types. Faraday was not very intelligent, while Thomas was the capable one responsible for management and creation. Faraday had never understood why Thomas would send him to Earth. Could there really be a conspiracy involved? So, with these doubts, he went to the lab, removed the CIA's surveillance camera, and began rewiring it on the workbench. On the other side, the screen in front of the agent went dark one by one. She was confused and didn't know what was happening. But soon, she realized her computer had been hacked. Faraday played a video that the soldiers had sent back. He put on headphones and amplified a certain frequency in the background sound. The piercing sound waves caused the agent to drop her headphones immediately. However, Faraday could hear the information clearly. He then rushed to Justin's place that night. He walked up to Justin's ear and whispered, "Thomas lied to us. He never planned to return to Ansha. He wants to bring the Ancients to Earth." At the same time, the Hatch siblings from the tech company were also making moves. They didn't want to be manipulated by the CIA like their parents. They realized that the only force capable of opposing the CIA was the oil tycoon behind the energy department. So, secretly, They tried to connect with the tycoon's people to see if they could collaborate, and this little subplot was changing the course of the story, as they had never seen such ridiculous forced confessions. A hot cigarette butt was pressed onto the man's face, yet he showed no reaction. Not only that, but he also looked at the other person with a silly expression. The bewildered CIA agents were also confused. They used pliers to pull out one of Faraday's teeth. Faraday then clicked his teeth and said, "I thought you wanted me to eat the pliers. I'm glad it's just pulling teeth." This frustrated the agent. They immediately resorted to their most vicious tactic. They covered Faraday's face with a rag and poured bottled water over it like a waterfall. They wanted to simulate the feeling of drowning while he breathed. However, the water on the rag instantly disappeared. Only when the water ran out did Faraday proudly tell them, "I have 4 stomachs. I drank all the water." At that moment, Spencer, the leader, remembered something. He ordered his men to bring an X-ray emitter. Sure enough, this time Faraday suffered. His mouth opened like a faucet and he spat out half a bucket of water. After he finished spitting, Faraday looked exhausted and in pain. Seizing the opportunity, Spencer took out his phone and played a harsh sound, asking him, "What is this?" Faraday replied, "It's an order, telling the remaining people to prepare to go to Earth." Everyone was shocked to hear this. It turned out that Faraday was an alien, and the key was that he had an accomplice named Thomas. A few days ago, the CIA discovered that Thomas had been hiding in a jungle, secretly sending signals to outer space. He had also cruelly killed the soldiers who came to capture him. So, the CIA decided to stop hiding and directly sent the military to capture Faraday. However, they were still too late. Faraday had already sensed the danger and moved the quantum fusion device they had just built. At that moment, Spencer broke out in a cold sweat. He could imagine the scenario of aliens descending from the sky. Moreover, with the fusion device capable of moving mountains and filling seas, this meant that humanity's end was imminent. So, Spencer continued to use the X-ray to force a confession. He needed to find out where Thomas and the fusion device were, but it turned out that this alien had a special ability. When his consciousness was dispersed, people from his subconscious would appear. Faraday's subconscious was a lady who reminded him, "You can use Spencer's weakness to backstab him." Faraday quickly shook his head. "This is too crazy. I can't do it." She reminded him, "You once hacked into all the networks of Earth, the internet, dark web, local networks, everything. You've seen Spencer's files, right?" Faraday suddenly understood. He shouted Spencer's other last name and told him, "I know everything about you." Spencer immediately dismissed everyone, leaving only himself and Faraday. It turned out that Spencer had a hidden identity. He was the son of a terrorist. The awkward part was that he had been raised by the CIA. Although he had changed his last name, he had been secretly investigating his parents' whereabouts all these years. Faraday suggested they play a game of Russian roulette. For each question Faraday answered about Spencer's background, Spencer would have to fire a shot. However, Spencer survived the first 4 shots, which was quite miraculous. In the end, Faraday decided to break Spencer's psychological defense. He told Spencer, "You hid evidence while investigating Thomas, secretly making moves behind your boss's back. Do you really think your superior doesn't know? He was once part of Thomas's research team, and he knows everything. They raised you just to use you. You poor thing." Unexpectedly, Spencer, overcome with emotion, gave up on the 5th question and directly shot at Faraday. At a critical moment, Spencer's agent appeared, shooting Spencer and quickly taking down the others. She saved Faraday, clearly an undercover agent. Just as everyone was confused about her identity, a car from the oil tycoon arrived outside, blinding Faraday and the others before taking them away. However, when they reached their destination, the mastermind revealed himself Thomas. It turned out that the so-called oil tycoon was actually Thomas. Just as Faraday was about to question Thomas about why he had changed the plan to bring the ancients to Earth, he realized the spaceship Thomas had prepared was so small. When he asked, he found out that Thomas only planned to bring the elites, while the worker bees would be abandoned. Faraday's family were all worker bees. Faraday instantly lost control and shouted at Thomas, "So, there's one question, after all the elites come to Earth, who will do the work of the worker bees since there will be no more worker bees on Earth?" It turned out that just like Faraday had cured Justin's father, the cure had side effects that could lead to human extinction. Those who were cured would gradually lose their human traits and become mechanized beings. These beings were called worker bees. As a result, the 2 aliens and 1 human had a disagreement. Thomas advocated bringing the elite ancients to Earth and abandoning the rest, while humans would take on the worker bee role. Faraday opposed abandoning his family on Antia. and the fate of humanity would be decided by Justin, a human, because the encryption algorithm of the core fusion device was in her hands. Thomas was anxious. He told Justin, without the quantum fusion device, Earth will be doomed by 2030 with high temperatures. The disaster on Ansha teaches us that surviving is the most important thing. However, Justin had seen her father change due to genetic modification and become a tool-like person. Having no emotional connection with family members felt the same as losing them. So, she firmly refused to hand over the algorithm. Thomas then turned to persuade Faraday. Since Thomas had already taken control of the tech company through a subsidiary and transferred all the shares of both companies to Faraday, the rest of the tasks would be up to Faraday. But Faraday said, "I only want my wife and children." Thomas told him, "I've been on a mission on Earth for several light years to save my people, and my family died on Ansha. Now, you are all I have. Do you understand what this means?" Faraday is the hope of Ansha. While Thomas sees hope as a child, this represents the highest form of species reproduction. Faraday finally accepts this mission, but he hasn't completely abandoned his original intentions. He pleads with Justin to unlock the fusion device for him. Justin, emotionally, says it's impossible. "Just the thought of my daughter not recognizing me, I can't live with that." Faraday quickly assures him that he will not let that happen, because he also loves Molly. Justin doesn't believe Faraday understands what love is, to which Faraday explains, "I've learned. It was when I was robbed, and you turned the car around to save me. It was when I saw you relentlessly care for your ailing father. It was when I made mistake after mistake. Yet you chose to forgive me. You taught me what love is." Faraday's sincere words nearly moved Justin, adding to his worry about the future of Earth. Justin convinces himself to agree to Faraday. Time quickly passes, and they arrive at the tech company's new product launch. The venue is packed, and outside, the CIA and MI5 are on the move. Armed soldiers are storming the venue, while a fully armed convoy heads toward Justin's home. Justin is watching Faraday's live stream online. Faraday has now become the center of attention, his every move reflecting the composure of a successful person. He introduces the groundbreaking product to the audience in the venue and to the world. Meanwhile, armed personnel pay no attention to the many ordinary civilians in the venue and invade the hall. Faraday, unfazed by the armed threat, opens the box in his hand. The small fusion device floats up instantly. The audience erupts in a thunderous scream as the fusion device blooms like a lotus flower, lighting up the entire city's night sky. The scene shifts to Faraday being brought to an interrogation room. Rulers from various fields watch behind one-way glass. They remove Faraday's hood. His first words are that he wants to see Justin and Hatch. The man across from him ignores this request and directly asks, "How many fusion devices have you produced?" Faraday waits until Justin and Hatch arrive before calmly responding, "We can produce as many fusion devices as you want. The important thing is, I'm going back to my home planet." At the same time, he has transferred the shares to these two men. They are now the actual controllers of the tech company. "So if you want to move against them, you'd better think carefully." The woman responds, "We won't harm you, but I'll lock you three in a cave. What you control means nothing." Faraday had already anticipated this. He says, "If that happens, the quantum fusion structure and algorithm will be released online within 12 hours, and people all over the world will have access to it for free." He then asks Hatch to tell the woman what will happen next. Hatch says, "First of all, China leads the world in production scale and speed. If they get it, we'll be number 2. Also, we have many enemies. If they get it, we're in serious danger." All the leaders gasp in shock. In this standoff, Faraday and the others emerge victorious. From now on, this green energy will slowly spread across Earth. After bidding farewell to those around him, Faraday sets off on his journey home. He doesn't want to follow Thomas's plan. He's determined to bring all the Anxians to Earth. What challenges will Faraday face? And what will he gain? And what interesting stories will unfold when humans and Anxians live together on the same planet? I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.